Cool. Okay. So we have an incredible fortune today to have Michael Hill, or Mike, or GeePaw, one of the top guys in my mind in this industry, which says a lot. And I've been following GeePaw for a long time, read everything and watched everything. Consider you my mentor, and I learn so much from you every day. I consider, like, you're a very practical guy, you're a very hands-on guy, but yeah, I hope you don't mind if I consider you a software philosopher. I think you have formulated a philosophy which I admire, and I think we need more of software philosophers. And philosophy is not navel gazing; it is big mind, big thinking, and then applying to your particular, as you say, micro situation where you want to hit the nail on the head, and everything is not going to come back as because we live in a world, like I like to say, with four characteristics: uncertainty, ambiguity, incompleteness, and confusion. And the software developers, we deal with these four every day. We never have complete information. It's always something happens tomorrow. Say, oh God, if I knew this yesterday. Uncertainty, nothing is certain. Ambiguity, we think you and I communicated, nothing was left. Later on, you say, oh God, I misunderstood you, I apologize. And confusion, what do we do next? What is the most important thing I should be doing right now? And so I think you bring a lot of like kick-ass material to these four questions. So I'm just like, over to you, and I'm going to sit back and enjoy your wisdom. Thank you.
Okay, cool. Thank you so much, Alex. That's a really nice intro. I appreciate it. I'm delighted that I have been of any service at all. I don't know. I don't know when the last time anybody said such nice things about me was, but it's been a while. Anyway, so here's our plan. What we're going to do is I'm going to review a couple things that possibly you folks will have already seen before, but that's okay. I use different words every time I do it. And then Alex and I'll probably back and forth a little bit and talk about some of the issues that you might actually be encountering out there as you take this journey. I strongly concur both with the idea that we need more philosophy and the idea that that's really what I do. I'm a software pragmatist. I'm very dirty. I am in this for the money. I'm not in it for intellectual purity. I am not in it to be a patriot or any of that sort of crap. And this is my job, and I enjoy being good at my job, partly because I enjoy being good at it, and I enjoy being paid for it too. My customers want me to ship more value faster, and I've been doing essentially what started with extreme programming back over 20 years ago, and has morphed somewhat as any 20-year-old thing you would do, and have gotten to the place where I'm at. I am a professional coach. I spend time coaching software development teams. I do not affiliate myself with any particular brand or school. You won't hear me saying, come to Crazy GeePaw's software coaching warehouse. Why are my prices so low? We'll just install this system, and then from that point forward, everything will be wonderful. Instead, what I'm constantly looking for is an iterative approach to better. I'm obsessed with the idea that almost no matter where I go, when I encounter folks, I find that individuals and teams both have in their head a better self, stronger, wiser, kinder, faster, less bugs, all of that stuff, more collaborative, a better mentor, all of those things. We all have that idea in our head of how we could be better. And teams have that idea too in their head of how they could be better. And that's my specialty, is helping people see the openings that will let them step a little bit closer to who or how they wish they were. A note, people do call me Mike and Michael, but the truth is, my name really is pretty much GeePaw these days. It sounds weird because it's like, is that a brand name or what's up with that? I became a grandfather. My wife is a little bit older than me, and her two kids from her first marriage were practically adults when I got on the scene. So I actually had my first grandchild when I was just 31 years old. And my friends and family thought that was hilarious. So they started calling me, first grandfather, then grandpa, then GeePaw. And so GeePaw is not, now it's obvious because I'm a graybeard and, and I have a lot of G kids, but it was not obvious 30 years ago. And that's why people call me GeePaw nowadays. So GeePaw is just fine. So Alex told me a little bit about where you folks are at, and that's great, and it gives me fodder for my stuff. I want to start by just reviewing really quickly what I call the 5 underplayed premises of test-driven development. I'd say the 5, and these are the 5 that come to my mind. And actually, even almost as soon as I start this, I start thinking about a 6th one, and I'll tell you about that in a minute. Why do we call these underplayed premises? Because they're baked into test-driven development at such a deep level that they're almost like the air we breathe. When you already bit the bullet and have become a test-driven developer, you don't even see them anymore. You're like, oh, well, yeah. If somebody points it out, you notice it, but the rest of the time you just live in that world. And it underpins really everything we do. And yet they're underplayed because people don't see them and they don't talk enough about them. So the first of those 5 premises is called the money premise. I already touched upon it. The money premise goes like this. We're in this for the money. And what I mean by that is to point out a whole bunch of things that we're not in it for. In software development, the only way you make money is to ship more value faster. You can't not ship, and it can't be valueless. Now, I will say this, value is a great big word. It hides a lot of things. I'm not talking here about questions of quality or feature slamming, where we slam random new features in at the fastest possible pace. Value is a complicated proposition. Nevertheless, the reason I do test-driven development is because if anything that I have to do involves me changing high structure, high detail branching logic that I wrote, test-driven development lets me do it faster. I'm really corrupt that way. I'm in this for the money. What I'm trying to do is go as fast as I possibly can to consistently give value to my customers. And that's the money premise. And you might think, well, what else could it be about? Well, I'll tell you the 3 things that it is most commonly about, people will talk about, it's about art. It's about my expression of my inner turmoil and humans, inhumanity to humans, and the never, okay, whatever. I'm not in this for art. I'm in it for money. I don't do it. I don't do the things I do in code because it makes the code beautiful. It's not that I can't see beauty in code, because I can. It's that isn't what drives me. Another thing is patriotism. They say it a lot of different ways, but decency, commitment to my team, satisfying future generations. None of these things are why I roll code. I am not using TDD as any sort of morality. Instead, I am just doing it because it ships more value faster. Art, patriotism. Oh, intellectual purity. So I'm an egghead, right? I love books. I love theory. I'm obsessed with these sorts of grand theoretical topics. And I really love and enjoy that kind of stuff. But you know what? I don't write tests to satisfy intellectual purity. I write tests to go faster. And I always do. And when writing a test won't make me go faster, I don't do it. Okay. So you won't find even a little bit of purity in my approach in terms of intellectual purity. That's what we mean by the money premise. I'm not going to spend as much time on the rest, but I will spend some more time on some of them. The judgment premise says that we are completely, irredeemably, irremediably, excuse me, happily dependent on individual humans using their individual judgment. If you've been investigating test-driven development, you might have gone out on the internet and you will see a lot of people whose method for test-driven development and their description of their method reads like a computer algorithm. It reads like a non-branching, human judgment-free process, as if software was a jack in the box and you just turn the crank and then the software comes out. Surprise. The judgment premise says no software development, whether you're using TDD or anything else, but certainly when you're using TDD, there's no way to codify it. All there are heuristics and humans, and human judgment is something we quite happily depend on all the time. In particular, you will hear me very rarely use the word always or the word never. I will, in fact, give you my 2 always never rules. Always suspect always and never. And always put the cornbread down in the bottom of the bowl and then put the bean soup over on top. Other than that, I really don't have any always never rules in my life. And that's a big deal for me. That be suspicious of that. That's the judgment premise. We rely on individuals making judgment calls. And of course, you know, that means sometimes we're going to wrangle. We're going to argue about what the right judgment is. Arguing about what the right judgment is good. It's what makes us powerhouse geeks. And I'm very proud of that aspect of my community, that we do spend so much time wrangling about how best to use our judgment. The correlation premise says that internal quality and productivity are directly correlated. They go up together and they go down together. There is another kind of quality called external quality, and that's different. You might notice we could get there faster if we did the 95% case and skipped the 5% case and didn't worry about that for now. So that's external quality. And we can shave the hell out of external quality and go faster, and that's great. It's not, as a developer in a team, it's not really my job to have to make that decision. That's usually somebody else's decision, and that is just fine. Those are hard decisions. I don't envy the people who have to make them. External quality is anything someone can tell about your program without looking at the source code. Internal quality is everything else. Everything you have to have inspected the source code to be able to say about the program is internal quality. You can't shave internal quality to go faster. And the reason is because if we wrote out the wrong econometric function that would show you how much are you going to produce today, the 3 biggest terms are: how good are you? How hard is the domain? What did you start with? And that's the issue, because here's the thing. Although you can get better, you get better slowly. You can't really act. Your will help you with that, but it takes time. The difficulty of the domain hardly changes at all. It usually changes in a matter of across years of time, not anything like minutes. But that 3rd largest term, what code did you start with? That is under our direct ability to control. And that's why we say internal quality and productivity go up together and they go down together. And we can never trade one for the other. That's the correlation premise. Now, these next 2 premises, I think, may actually come into play when we start freewheeling and talking about the actual difficulties that you folks may be encountering with TDD as you forge your way through it. They are the chaining premise and the steering premise. The chaining premise says the best way to test a chain is to test every pair of links in the chain. Now, I say best. What I mean is cheapest, fastest. Remember, I'm corrupt. The best way for me to increase my confidence that my code is going to ship and work perfectly is, in fact, to test along the links time and time again. The chaining premise particularly drives something that, this is my own terminology, it's getting increasing acceptance out there in the world of geekery, but micro-test driven development. You will learn that I write very few end-to-end tests. I can encounter situations where I have to write a damn end-to-end test, but I never volunteer for that. You have to drag me kicking and screaming because you have a defect I can't find with a microtest. That's really the only reason I do that. And so you'll find that the tests that I advocate are really teeny tiny. And because they're teeny tiny, they're not testing large scale function. And they're never testing the whole chain, or at least very, very rare. They're testing the connections between individual elements of that chain. And that's the chaining premise. Finally, the steering premise. Test and testability are first-class design participants. I don't care what kind of design technique you use. This is relevant to what we apparently have been talking about in the team. I don't care what design technique you use. You can use whiteboards, you can use structured text, you can apply DDD, or you can go real old school with noun circling. You can do all sorts of things to come up with a design. But whatever you do, tests and testability steer the shape of that design, the same as desirable features steers that design, the same as performance on load steers that design. All of those things are co-equal participants or citizens in our design. And that is the steering premise. So we got these 5 premises. I'm going to add a 6th one I'm going to consider in a little bit when we start schmoozing around. But the money premise says we're in this for the money. The judgment premise says we are absolutely reliant on individual humans making best judgment. The correlation premise says that internal quality and productivity go up and go down together. They're directly correlated. The chaining premise says we get the biggest bang for our buck by testing link by link instead of testing whole chains all at once. And the steering premise says tests and testability have to participate as first-class citizens in our design process. All of those they form a ring around test-driven development. And if you're inside test-driven development, you don't even question them. In fact, often you don't even see them because you bought in already. And because you bought in, those are the premises that you bought into, and they become a fish swimming in water. Does a fish know what water is? Well, I think that's a kind of a cutesy philosophical question. I don't know whether they do or not, or really that care that much, but but you get the idea of the question. The water that a test-driven developer swims in is made up of those 5 premises. Okay, we're going to take a short break. Alex and I are going to touch base for a minute, and I'll be right back with more random conversation. All right, and we're back.
We're back. So this was, drinking from a fire hose for most of us because you're so full of this. You're hitting the nail with every sentence, and I'm just like, my head is reeling. But I want to throw one thing at you, which recently you wrote about, and this is the rework avoidance theory, which we're seeing all over the place, where we're like, I'm very upset if we have to do rework. I already paid for this. Why are we reworking things? And I think you have a really good explanation, which will illuminate the false economy of avoiding rework. Cool. So please.
All right. So I call it rework avoidance theory, and I shorthand that to RAT because rats are negative and I'm a politician. So rework avoidance theory essentially amounts to the idea that It's the opposite of what we call iteration. I mentioned that really there's a sixth premise. Now, I've never raised the sixth premise out there in the video land and one thing or another, but increasingly, I am wanting to offer a sixth premise called just the iteration premise. Rework avoidance theory says, never change the same thing twice, right? That every time you change the same thing twice, then what you're doing is you're going backwards, right? And what this comes from is a combination of a couple of different models, but what it amounts to is something that looks like this. Never watch the screen while you're actually drawing. That's a pro tip from a professional presenter.
And just to be sure, this is your hand, right?
Oh, geez, should I get my nails clean? Oh, yeah, I'm good. Okay. Rework avoidance theory says that we're at A and we want to be at Z, and we know exactly what A is. We know exactly what Z is. And what we're going to do is we're going to think really hard, and then we're going to perfectly jump from A to Z. We will draw a plan.
Giant step.
Yeah. We will have a giant step that is a straight line that takes us from A to Z, and nothing will change. Kent Beck said to me recently, it's a quote actually from him from years ago, but he brought it back up again. He said, you know, the only time your plan works perfectly is if you don't learn anything. I was like, oh damn, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
The only time your plan works perfectly is if you didn't learn anything. So anyway, this is rework avoidance theory, and it's based on an idea that's like a runner, a solo runner, racing down an extremely well-marked footpath from a starting line to a finish line. And there are all sorts of assumptions built into that rework avoidance theory. And the logic of rework avoidance is perfect. If A, then B, if C, then D, if E, then F, if A and C and F, then it's this big pile of reasoning. Problem is, the premises are very shaky, very shaky. So one of those premises would be the idea that that the size of a step is linearly connected to the effort of that step. What do I mean by that? I'm going to come back to this, John, but what do I mean by that? Correlate two values on a graph. And what you see there is a straight line. Sure, if this is the opposite of effort, this is performance or production. Sure, if I make the step bigger, of course, it takes more effort to do the step. Everybody buys that. However, the relationship here is a perfect straight line. A step that is 3 times as large takes 3 times as much effort. That's the theory of linear correlation. In real life, though, let me use a separate marker. I'm so happy I bought these markers. Small victories, Alex. Small victories in my world.
I know.
Every little win.
It's all about. It's all about baby steps.
Yeah. In real life, though, what this curve actually looks like is like this. It's got a kind of a knee shape, and you can draw it more dramatically than this, but I'm not trying to overplay my case. What happens is the bigger, for a while, across some limited range, this line matches the straight line. However, as soon as you step past, well, I could draw the curve a little better. It looks a little more like this. It's like, it's more like that. You step past, and all of a sudden, the effort doesn't just get bigger because the step got bigger. It gets bigger. The bigger the effort gets, the bigger the step gets, the bigger the effort. What are we talking about? Where does this knee-shaped curve come in? Alex, you got...
Sorry to interrupt, just a quick question. Is this kind of, can we use the example of juggling balls, where everybody can juggle 2 balls? Some people learn 3, some people go 5. No one's ever juggled 75 balls, ever.
In fact,
so there's a certain saturation point where you just...
Yep.
Sorry.
Almost everybody can juggle 1.
Yeah.
Most people can do 2. The people who tell you that they practice juggling can do 3, maybe 4, or if they're quite good, 5. A professional juggler, a guy busking out on the street for his money with his hat that put tips in, those people can typically juggle 7 things.
Yeah.
However, beyond 7, and the effort gets so hard so fast. You know what the world record is? You know how many people can juggle 12 balls?
Just a few. Yeah.
No one. No one has ever juggled 12 balls.
Yeah.
Now, to define it, I'll define juggle rigorously the same way the Guinness Book of World Records does. Juggling 12 balls means you take that first ball and it goes around the loop twice.
Yeah.
Only 2 people have ever claimed to be able to do 11 balls, and only 1 of them got it on video. The first ball went around once, it went around twice, it didn't go around the 3rd time.
But that's going from like
incredibly knee-shaped that curve is.
Going from 1 to 2, not such a big effort, is going from 5 to 7, not such a suddenly huge effort going from 7 to 8, etc. Right?
So you get these knee-shaped curves, and where does that come from? Well, really, it comes from the fact that all of these processes are so organic. Juggling is a really organic process. It involves lots of human manipulation, right? Lots of very delicate, rapid movement, and lots of coordination. Well, where does the problem come from when we're talking about code? That problem, I'll show it here again. That problem is this knee-shaped curve. Knee-shaped curves show up all the time when we talk about humans. The juggling case is a very good example. The running speed case is a very good example. All of these are, the limits are stark. So what limit are we hitting with step size in computer programming? In 1954, a guy named George Miller wrote a paper called Magic Number 7 plus or minus 2. It was subtitled, I'm Being Persecuted by an Integer. And what it was Miller was an early cognitive scientist. Cognitive science wasn't a thing then, but he was an early cognitive scientist, and he was getting his grad students to run all these experiments around intellect and IQ, intelligence. And they would bring him his data, and they would bring them all the data from all their experiments, and a number kept popping out of him. A number between 5 things and 9 things. And what he posited was that number, 7 plus or minus 2, actually represents the number of independent things that a human can hold in their head at one time. A kind of readiness to hand of concepts inside a brain. In other words, mental bandwidth. So that was in 1954. His experiments and many, many other experiments have been run literally tens of thousands of times. And the modern conclusion is that George Miller was wrong. Totally wrong. He got that wrong. He was way wrong. The actual number is 5 plus or minus 1. The problem was that there were hidden correlations in that data that allowed us to make parts subservient to other parts. It's called chunking. And that if you ruthlessly strip out those relationships to get to genuinely independent concepts, he overestimated it's really 5 things plus or minus 1. In a program, the larger the step, the more things you have to hold in your head at one time to think about. And that is why you hit this crazy, crazy need. So what is our alternative? The thing that everybody wants to do, and this is a lovely thing, it really is a lovely thing. This is an excellent idea. What if we did it like this instead? And so on. It's still a perfectly straight line, but now each piece of it is one step. Excellent. That's a very good start. Let's call this model 1, and we'll call this model 2. And here's the problem. Model 2 is still structurally based on model 1. In order to get a model 2 correctly, I still have to think all the way from A to Z. And if I'm wrong, I can't do model 2 either. Now, what possible answers can we come up with? There are basically 2 of them, although I'm going to smoosh them together and call them model 3. Model 3 looks like this. It looks like this. That's a crazy looking model, isn't it? You would say to yourself, well, that's just stupid. That could not possibly be more efficient than models 1 and 2. And you would be mistaken. The reason it is more efficient is because, in fact, small steps have inherent value above and beyond their value in building us towards Z. If we could pull off model 2 would be more effective. But model 2 is also way more effective than model 1. Problem is how extraordinarily difficult. Model 2 is not really significantly easier to achieve than model number 1, so we can't get there. Doesn't matter. Yeah, that would be better if we could do that, but we can't. We got model 3. What is it about these small steps? Notice that those steps are not on a straight line. Notice that implicitly, let's see, here's a place where, here's a place where I took a step and it didn't add anything. If I tweak this, here's a step that seems to have gone backwards. How can that possibly be more effective? The answer is because of that inherent value. What inherent values do we get? We get interruptibility. I don't know, Alex, if people in your shop get really cranky when they don't get 6 hours of uninterrupted time every day, but it is a standard complaint amongst developers. You can't interrupt me. The problem is that I can't give you 6 hours a day because things are actually relatively rarely stable for 6 hours in a day. I need to have you interrupted. I need you to work on this feature, but I also need you to work on this feature. Just today, I got the opportunity to close a deal for $25 million. If you can just make it so that 2 people can share the same account, even though they have different logins. Right? When you hear that, you're like, go, 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 go. I want you to do that. In order to do that, I'm going to add the next thing. I have to be interruptible, and I have to be steerable. Okay? So interruptibility and steerability are huge benefits to the small step approach. A third aspect of it, and this is really hard to explain to people. Juice. Here's a funny thing, and you'll see this if you actually start practicing test-driven development. Every time you complete one of these steps, you know what happens to you? Your body shoots you a dose of dopamine. I mean, I'm not being figurative here. I'm not being metaphorical. Literally, it shoots you a dose of dopamine. You feel better. Now, has it been your experience that you are more productive when you feel good or more productive when you feel bad? Duh. I'm way more productive when I feel good, especially if the work I'm doing is creative. And everything we do as a geek is creative work. So interruptibility, steerability, and juice come from the small steps. And they come from that model. But the price of those small steps is that we can never put ourselves in a situation where, well, let me put it this way. The price of that is that we have to break our work up into steps that are small enough to be viable, that we can actually ship. We can actually ship them. How are we going to do that? I'm going to get off my picture for a minute and come back to this. How are we going to do that? The answer lies in something called iteration. When you, I'm sure no one there has ever worked with an incredibly slow internet connection, but if you have an incredibly slow internet connection and you hit a website that's backed up by an exquisite picture, you watch how it updates. What it does is it gives you great big chunks of solid color. And then when all the great big chunks are done, it refines various parts of them. And they get sharper and sharper and sharper until the image has finished loading. The reason they do that is because they give you the big thing. It occupies the big space. And at different points, different ones of us, depending upon what we're paying attention to, may or may not have enough resolution. So we're satisfied sooner. But ultimately, we want to get the perfect resolution. And then everybody will be satisfied. Comparable thing, if you've ever watched a human who was an artist, unlike my own stupid self, but if you were a human and if you're watching a human draw a cat, one of the things you'll see them do over and over again is exactly iteration. They don't draw a perfect cat-shaped line and then begin shading it. They go, the rough, crudest outline of catness. And then they fill in a part. And then they fill in another part. What they're doing is reworking. What that image loading is doing is reworking. What we do when we do not stop and think about the 27-part login process and get it all perfectly correct and implement 100% of it before it ever goes live. What we do when we first say, here's 2 boxes, it's your email address and your damn password, right? That's all you get. Yeah. And then later we'll add the remember me checkbox. And then we'll add the I need to reset my password button. And then we'll add distinguishing between people we already recognized and people we don't on the loading page. And so on and so forth, right? That's rework. It's going to mean changing the HTML. It's going to mean changing the backend. It's going to mean changing things we've already changed. And what we're doing when we do that is rework, and it's iteration. And the reason we do it is because of that picture with the whacked out arrows, because the smaller steps make us go faster. A piece of this that is unclear, I'll get right to you. A piece of this that's unclear for a lot of people say, but yeah, that's not what runners do. That's not true. In fact, a running coach who's encountering a young running star for the first time is almost certain to take that 14 or 15 or 16-year-old kid and say, look, I need you to take smaller steps. The reason is because the logic says bigger steps will get me there faster. But the size of the step is not correlated with the effort of the step in a straight line. In fact, you lose leverage. Think of me. I'm certainly not going to demonstrate running for you. I'm too old for that crap. But think of me taking a big, long stride and flowing through the air. You know what I'm not doing when I'm flowing through the air? I'm not pushing or pulling. I'm coasting. You know what else I'm doing? I'm not in perfect control of when and how my foot hits the ground. So I'm making myself open to injury. It's called overstriding. That's what running coaches call it. And the first thing they do is they teach their young would-be runners, how to size their stride correctly so that they get maximum energy and effectiveness. All right, Alex, you had something.
I just want to, sorry to interrupt, just want to add one other thing that tends to, in my experience, muddy the waters or make it a little bit, which is the rigidity of the conviction that there is an end state and now you're shooting for it. And that end state is a debatable concept.
Right.
And as we are exploring and discovering, we may, have initial planning to go that way, but hey, market shifts, government regulatory, COVID kicks, our end state is looking in a completely different direction all of a sudden. And that interruptibility and steerability now is giving us a competitive advantage where we can say, okay, we can shift over there.
Most definitely. In fact, people get confused about that. When the scale of the step is small, you really can see the end point quite clearly and perfectly well, and the path to it. Again, though, it's part of that non-linearity. Once I expand, I'm in trouble, really. Let me ask it. Let me put it to you this way: when was the last time you stopped changing a piece of software? Right. The truth of the matter is, the day you ship, what do? We just fire everybody and send them home because the software is done?
That's the beginning, not the end. Yeah.
Right. That never happens. It never happens. Customer gets a hold of them and say, this is really awesome, but I wish that was a pull down that knew the 5 most common regulations so I could check them off. Can you do that? You're like, yes, I can. And it makes us happy. That's not even a troublesome thing. That's work. They're giving us, they're paying us for this.
Yeah, you've just whetted their appetite.
Yep.
Now they want way more than initially they thought they wanted, right?
One of the side effects of large step thinking is, so you're thinking through this large step. And the end point, the Z, I called it, is what we call a city on the hill. It's a faraway place. It's bright, it's shining, it's beautiful, it's perfect. The city on the hill. Have you ever seen a team argue about what color to paint the walls on the city on the hill? Because I've seen it over and over and over again. And in fact, some of those arguments, and these aren't arguments down there in the geeks. These are arguments up there where the big boys sit. Some of those arguments have huge political ramifications. And those people can be surprisingly violent with one another while they are determining a detail about the city on the hill that is 6 months away from us. We're 6 months away from ever having to even consider such a thing as that. I see this behavior all the time, and it's just one more way in which large steps slow us down.
Yeah. So, GeePaw, this is awesome. Thank you so much. I want to ask you, in the context of TDD, we have noticed a shift, let's say 30 years ago or 25 years ago, from the focus on made. We were always like into this is the thing made, and now we're on the market selling it, and this is our business. Something happened, and maybe you have better insight, where we can't back, or we were starting shifting focus from made to the making. And then in my experience, once you start doing TDD, your focus into making things all of a sudden reveals more about the maker, the team, the makers. And how did that come to be? Do you have any insight? Because this is a really interesting shift from the 19th century assembly line all the way. Now we are talking about, like we said, dopamine hitting me. I'm very, very creative when I feel good. And why? Because I have a nice way of making things that are keeping me happy. And I can't wait to wake up in the morning and go back to the making, because it fills my life with joy.
Yeah.
This shift is significant.
It is.
And it was thanks to Ken Beck and Ron Jeffries and yourself and other big guys. This is amazing what you guys did to buy us this happiness in at job instead of just being laying bricks, and just being like this repetitive, boring, mind-numbing activity. All of a sudden, we become thinkers, and like you say, pragmatic thinkers who are every step of the way getting this reward, this small victory, thanks to TDD. In my mind, XP, TDD, these are like essentials.
20 years ago, 2 decades and change, Kent Beck stood up in front of a room and he said to all these would-be extreme programmers, he said, really, all I was trying to do with extreme programming was make the world safe for programmers.
Yes.
And, at the time he said that, I thought it was really clever and cool, but I didn't really think much about it. It was really when we started applying his techniques, and I'm not even sure the extent to which Kent knew where this was going to go. But when we started applying these techniques, we started noticing more and more places where instead of having every conversation be about the artifact, we started talking about how you're going to make that artifact. When you look over at my little drawing with those steps, that's not a conversation about Z.
No. That's
a conversation about the making of Z. You can think of it as like a commentary track on your fancy DVD. It's not the DVD. It's how we made the DVD. And so that was a piece of that puzzle. Another piece of it is, of course, once you start practicing rapid feedback technique, one of the things you notice is how much better you feel about your life.
Uh-huh.
I mean, I know it's a silly thing, but I coined the phrase geek joy, I don't know, 10, 12, 15 years ago to describe that sensation of, I didn't get into this because I don't like programming, but I like programming. And, when we started the extreme programming movement, one of the things that I think people are unclear about, that group of individuals, we were not young, angry teenagers. We were between 30 and 40 years old, and we were at the top of the programming game. These are people who were very competent programmers. They knew all about code. Learning XP was not about getting more technique for code. It was about, I'm not happy with what I do, even though I started 10 years before, 5 years before, 20, in my case, 20 years before. I was a developer for 20 years before I discovered extreme programming. And I wasn't enjoying myself. It's like, you felt like, oh my God, everything pleasant about my job has been leached out of it, which might be okay if it were effective, but it isn't even effective. And so all of that sort of came together. I characterize it as saying that the biggest shift over the last 30 years, the biggest shift in software development has been the shift from 95% of our attention on the made and 5% split between the making and the makers to something that is much closer to 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. Test-driven development shorts the made in a real way. I mean, it's still there. It's a third. Not 95% though, it's a third. And the rest of the focus is split evenly between the technique of the making and the way the makers experience it. And how important that triad instead of a single focus really is. I believe it's genuinely revolutionary. And I also, to be honest with you, I have bad days when I think we're never going to get this across. But we made some slow inroads here and there, now and then. One of the most worrisome things to, I think, everybody who was part of the original generation, that the thing we call agile, is really a combination of 3 different methods: extreme programming, Scrum, and Alistair Coburn's Crystal Clear. And all of those folks have been in this now for 20 plus years, working on it. And it got coalesced into this word agile. I would guess that at more than half of the people who created agile are very dissatisfied with what we have right now. I certainly am, and I can certainly speak pretty well for the crowd that did the extreme programming part of that three triumvirate that created Agile. We're very unhappy with it because Agile has become a word about structure. Follow the rules, add up your timesheets, make your estimates, and so on and so forth. And that was never the part of this that we loved. What we loved was finding ways to have developers in community solve problems and being far more creative and flexible than almost anything that you see called Agile today. But hey, that's cool. You keep trying, right? I mean, I'll close with a Samuel Beckett quote. Go ahead and finish your thought, Alex, and then I'm going to give you my Samuel Beckett quote for a close. It's even relevant to the iteration principle. Go on.
Oh, just want to mention that you might.
Oh, you're breaking up. Why don't you try again?
Can you hear me now? Okay. The way I see it is shifting from quantity to quality. And this is not just software. This is in general our society. We've been obsessed with productivity, just produce. And then we woke up one morning and we see the oceans are clogged. Do we need this much crap? And I think we're slowly waking up to you know what? We don't need all these gadgets and gimmicks. Give me quality. Give me, instead of a big gulp of coffee, give me a small espresso that I'm going to enjoy. And it kind of coincides with societal change, where we also in software is saying we used to count, we used to judge people, evaluate people by the number of lines of code back in the day. But now it's almost like the number of lines of code you didn't write is what makes you a master, right? Yeah. So it's quality, it's changeability, it's like agility and the ability to be steerable, interruptible, and all that. So sorry for interrupting. Please continue with the quote.
You triggered in me a memory of my wife and I recently watched all 4 seasons of The Good Place over time. There's a great line early on in The Good Place where Eleanor is asking Michael, the designer of these fake heavens, why is it always frozen yogurt? Why is there a frozen yogurt place in every single version of heaven? And he's like, there's just something so human about taking a thing that's really great and making it a little less good so you can have more of it. I thought, wow, that's some brilliant writing.
Yeah, but remember the days of Super Size Me? Yeah, they're behind us. They're behind us, I believe.
They are, I think.
I hope so. It used to be Super Size Me. Yeah, get more bang for the buck. It's so mindless, right?
Yeah, it really is. No, I certainly regard the last 25 years of my career as actually being at least as much about changing the world as about changing geekery. And I'm trying to change the world through geekery because that's what I know how to do.
Yeah.
But really, in the rest of the world, I'm more of a follower and less of a leader. But it's the same sort of thing. It's like, let's make things better. Let's get better. My Beckett quote, Samuel Beckett wrote this in a letter, and I've always loved it so much. And it applies to iteration, not just in iterating when we're developing the code, but iterating when we're changing how we code and iterating when we're changing the world. Ever tried, ever failed, no matter. Try again. Try better. Fail better.
Yeah.
Fail better.
Fail better. And my quote from Buckminster Fuller, he says, there isn't anything in a caterpillar that is telling us that it's going to become a butterfly. So I think we are caterpillars now. We are about to cocoon. I'm being optimistic. I'm being an idealist. But the butterfly's coming sooner or later. But you can't see it.
Yeah, we don't know. We don't know how it's going to be. Yeah, it's not in there.
But it's going to happen.
Very cool.
But it's thanks to guys like you. You're changing the world because you have no idea how much you influence people, how many light bulbs go into my head when I read your muses. I'm like, I get excited. I walk. I want to jump up and down. I want to go for a walk. I'm like, my brain is rushing, right? Because it's so satisfying, And I love that you're a philosopher. I love it. I hope we get more people join and start thinking big thoughts, right? And breaking it down to particular, at problem at a hand, and not just mindlessly doing bricklaying. And I was like, okay, another day, another dollar, but like, you are making a big change. And I don't know I'm running out of words here, but I'm so helpful that you're there. Please continue. Plus, you have this phenomenal energy where I'm always on, checking your blog, your website. I'm like, oh my God, where do you find the time for such original thoughts, such originality? Anyway, I'm gushing. I apologize. I don't want to put you on the spot, but this has been a dream come true for me to get finally to hear you talk with you.
Wow.
Exchange some ideas, and let's continue. I think we can do amazing things as a gang of mobsters doing TDD.
We can change software. We can change changing software, and we can change the trade, and we can change the world. I absolutely believe that, and I absolutely encourage it. Thank you for the very kind words, and thank you for giving me an
my pleasure
to address your folks.
My pleasure.
There we go.
We will hopefully invite you again, and we can work together. I really appreciate your time, GeePaw. Have a great day and great week, and that's it for now.
Cool. Thanks, folks. Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.